Well, when you look at the local economy and the impact that Stokvels have, it's difficult to actually gauge the impact because we've never really lived without Stokvels. But what we know is that 11 million people plus actually save their money or move their money through this alternative financial system. And about 56 billion rands moves every year. Now, that's about 40% or slightly more of the country's adult population that actually relies on an alternative financial system. And that tells you firstly that the existing financial system has got inefficiencies for people to use and for the necessity of an alternative. What we know is that the positive impact of sort of bringing what is seen to be informal into the formal space and really leveraging off of Stokvels would be quite transformative to the economy. So when you look at how community savings can be used to improve the local economic activity, it's to sort of take every community as a microcosm and try to make sure that money actually stays within that community and the rand moves in that community for quite a long period of time. So when you start to aggregate funds within a community and use these funds for productive means, then what happens is that community starts growing and everybody that participates actually benefits from that money actually circulating within that little community. So you'd have to look at every little community as a microcosm and look at duplicating that model to really see an impact in various communities through community savings. In terms of the social challenges of the informal sort of moving into the formal, I think we've been let down by the formal system a lot. Now, what we found is that Stokvels have always been willing to engage with the formal system. And what happens is that we get to these institutions and they don't have the systems in place to actually onboard Stokvels. So there's a will from the Stokvel groups, yet the formal institutions don't have the systems in place to onboard. There's nothing that can be pulled off the shelf to actually service Stokvel. So there's a disconnect. That disconnect actually comes from the formal institutions. A lot of companies uptown would look to develop products for Stokvels. The approach should be to co-create products with the community. But the complexity comes with the nuances. There's a lot of misinterpretation that happens. And by the time the Stokvels receive the message or receive the product, if it doesn't work for them, what happens then from a corporate side is that Stokvel doesn't work. In terms of partnerships and new approaches in engaging with Stokvels, it's important to actually try to consolidate these services instead of having different partnerships for different functions. Because a Stokvel is a single entity that tries to solve their problems through a single solution. Now, when they need to go to company A for one service and a different company for another service, now that becomes logistically quite a nightmare. So to create a solution, a holistic solution that answers to the objectives of the Stokvels, that's what's needed. What we find in our community specifically is that we still deal with cash. Everything is still around relationships. So the collection of money happens in cash. And there's a social aspect to coming together around this collecting of the cash. Now, to move this money into the digital space, the idea is to have cash disappear and then start using cash in a more, in a digital way. But that gap needs to be bridged. And you see a lot of banks that actually are moving towards the digital, having to spend quite a lot in resources to educate people. It becomes quite an expensive exercise actually trying to migrate people from the existing practices into digital, but a very necessary one. So it's a good investment to invest in the human capital right now to actually hold people's hands and move them into the digital. Because if that's done correctly, then we can let go of the physical and truly be in the digital era.